Today, we're working on our national anthem. So the national anthem is a song called the Star-Spangled Banner. And I know you've heard it before at football games, hockey games, any kind of sporting event. Sometimes we play it in school too. And you know that when people hear it, they stand up, they take their hats off, sometimes they put their hand over their heart, and it's a song that every American should know. So we're gonna work on that today. And we're gonna start by reading this book called The Rocket's Red Glare. Our national anthem is sung at sporting and military events all across the country. But have you ever stopped to think about what the words really mean? Who wrote the lyrics that so many Americans know by heart? Where did the author get the inspiration for this patriotic song? A trip back through history to the choppy waters of the Chesapeake Bay will reveal the answers to those and many more questions about our nation's song. In the early 1800s, Britain was at war with France. Britain decided to prevent the United States from sending goods to France by stopping and searching U.S. vessels bound for France. Many Americans were captured and forced to work on British ships. It was then that U.S. President James Madison asked Congress to declare war on Britain. This became known as the War of 1812. By 1814, the war had found its way to the coast of the United States in the Chesapeake Bay. Waves splashed against the shore, and the sky above was blanketed with thick clouds as occasional rays of sunlight streamed through the mist. The small United States government boat, the Surprise, with the white flag of truce fluttering high from the center mast, knifed its way through the water. Francis Scott Key, a young Baltimore lawyer, never imagined that friendship, loyalty, or patriotism would place him on such a perilous mission. As the waves tossed their vessel, Mr. Key wondered if he and his friend Colonel Skinner could succeed in their mission. Their friend, Dr. William Beans, had been captured and was being held prisoner by the British forces. Armed only with courage and official papers provided by President Madison, Mr. Key hoped to negotiate for his friend's release. After all, Dr. Beans was not a soldier, but a private citizen. He had even entertained British officers of the flagship and had treated the wounds of some of the British military. However, those deeds might not be remembered with combat ready to erupt at any minute. Mr. Key and Colonel Skinner were finally alongside the anchored British flagship, the HMS Tennant. Their hearts beat with nervous anticipation. They climbed onto the ship's deck and were graciously received by Vice Admiral Sir Alexander Cochrane. The Admiral reviewed the papers carefully and agreed to allow Dr. Beans to go free under one condition, that Mr. Key and his entourage promised not to go back to shore where they could warn the U.S. troops of the impending assault, but instead to take their sloop out of harm's way and wait until the battle subsided. The Admiral added that they should take a good look at their red, white, and blue flag, for they would not see it the next morning. Mr. Key and his companions boarded their craft and gazed at the U.S. flag waving over the fort. As their boat surged through the waters, away from the impending battle, they wondered if the Admiral would be correct, that they would not see their waving flag the next morning. Mr. Key feared for the soldiers at Fort McHenry. He feared for his brother-in-law who was stationed there. He knew that the fort was undermanned. He knew that warding off an assault by such a powerful British Navy would take great courage. An uneasy stillness hung in the quiet morning air. Then the loud thunder of cannons shook the bay. The British guns splashed rays of light into the awakening sky. The assault on Fort McHenry had begun. The U.S. flag waved proudly now, but would it still be there the next morning? Mr. Key and his companions braced for the worst and hoped for the best as they watched Fort McHenry being attacked. The American flag, the pride of its countrymen, rippled boldly amidst the clouds of smoke and the blasts of cannons. The shelling lasted all through the day and into the night. The British fired over 1,500 rounds at the fort. The assault was merciless, but there was still hope. Mr. Key and his friends could still see the Stars and Stripes flying bravely over Fort McHenry. They gazed at the fort's defensive walls, or ramparts, as the shelling rained down. The flag, amidst the smoke, was gallantly streaming. Could the soldiers of Fort McHenry survive such a pounding? Would the Admiral's words be true? Would they not see the flag at dawn? All through the night, rockets burst in the air and bombs exploded with red blasts that lit up the sky. Then, as morning broke, the shelling finally subsided. A calm spread across the Chesapeake Bay. Coils of smoke enveloped the sky. Even with field glasses, nothing could be seen. The stench of spent gunpowder wove in and out of their heads. Finally, the smoke cleared enough to answer their question. Had the United States held its ground? The U.S. flag waved proudly over Fort McHenry. Mr. Key was filled with inspiration, for the flag was still there. In fact, an even bigger and brighter set of stars and stripes was flying proudly in the sky. The fort's commander, Major George Armistead, had ordered the storm flag, which was flying at the time of the attack, be replaced by the bigger garrison flag, proclaiming boldly and triumphantly that the United States had persevered. Bursting with pride, Mr. Key exclaimed, "Oh, say, can you see?" He pulled an envelope from his pocket and wrote down those first words to what would become our national anthem. The British ships slinked out of the bay. As he watched them retreat, Mr. Key continued writing, amazed that after such a hail of rockets, he could still see the Star-Spangled Banner yet wave. Their boat headed back to shore. Mr. Key kept writing. They were safe, and the fort had survived a monumental barrage of cannonballs. Mr. Key was overwhelmed with pride. He completed the first stanza of the poem while on the boat, even before reaching the shore. Mr. Key found that his brother-in-law, Judge Nicholson, survived the battle. Mr. Key shared his poem with his brother-in-law, who was overwhelmed with inspiration. Judge Nicholson had the poem printed by a young apprentice named Samuel Sands. It was entitled The Defense of Fort McHenry and distributed throughout Baltimore. An actor, Ferdinand Durang, put the poem to music, and the city exploded with enthusiasm. However, it wasn't until Baltimore newspapers printed the lyrics with the instructions to have it sung to the tune of To Anacreon in Heaven, a popular English pub song, that it was shaped into its current version. Mr. Key probably never imagined that his feelings of patriotism, written on an envelope in the choppy waters of the Chesapeake Bay, would serve as an inspiration to all Americans. The first scrawls of that song that Mr. Key wrote, as well as the hand-sewn flag that flew that day, remain symbols of pride and freedom, and every year inspire thousands of visitors who come to see them at the Maryland Historical Society in Baltimore and the Smithsonian National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. Mr. Key's song is a song about freedom and overcoming insurmountable odds. It is a song about bravery and sacrifice. It is a song that pays tribute to the flag and all the men and women who died to make us free. It is a song for the people. It is America's song. It is our national anthem.